In this video, I will be replacing the CVT fluid on a 2017 Nissan Sentra, which this may also work on other Nissan cars. This is one of very few videos out there and it's a very in-depth video. Before I start, I want to talk about the maintenance history on this car. The first transmission fluid service was done at the Nissan dealership at 52,800 miles. There, they added the Nissan NS-3 fluid. I also asked for a sample of the original fluid and this is how it came out. The second service was done at the same dealership at 107,169 miles. This time they added a CVT cleaner and enhancer to clean and add friction to the CVT. The third service will be performed in this video at 144,000 miles. I bought 5 quarts of the Nissan NS-3 transmission fluid at the dealership for $20 per bottle for a total of $100. As you can see, it's the genuine NS-3 CVT fluid designed for this Nissan car and transmission. For this time, I won't be using the CVT enhancer because I don't think it's necessary. To start off, the transmission should be warmed up for 20 minutes to warm up the fluid. You can turn on the car's AC so the radiator fan blows some air to the engine and it doesn't overheat. Also, you can go through all the gears so the fluid goes through all the valves. While the car is warming up, I will show all the tools needed for this job. I will use a 19mm socket, a 10mm socket, a 5mm Allen key, and an adjustable wrench, which I'll explain why you need this later on in the video. If you plan on lifting the car up, then you will need a good hydraulic jack and 4 jack stands. Although it's not necessary to lift the car up as there is plenty of space between the car and the ground. It's just that I'll use the jack to lift the car so that I can show everyone the components. Once again, I will be lifting the driver's side only so that I can show the bottom components, but you don't have to lift the car. So once the engine is off, we can now approach the engine and I will show the transmission cap. That black cap needs to be removed. You do so by using a flathead screwdriver. The dipstick is located behind the coolant reservoir. The coolant reservoir also needs to be removed so that there can be enough space to work on. I'm using a 10mm socket to remove the bolt. After removing the bolt, we can put the reservoir aside and don't remove the hose from the reservoir or the liquid will start leaking out. Now I will show where you need to insert the funnel and eventually the CVT fluid. That tube and that cap you see there is where you insert the funnel. But before, you need to remove the cap by inserting a flathead screwdriver. Once the cap has been removed, we can notice that there are no transmission dipsticks on these Nissan cars. There's just a cap and an O-ring, but that's it. There is actually no way to measure the fluid level on these CVT transmissions. Now that the car is in the air, I'll distinguish between the engine oil pan and the transmission oil pan. The one I am pointing to now is the transmission pan and that is the 19mm bolt. The one on the far end is the engine oil pan along with its oil filter. I will start off by removing the 19mm bolt. Be ready to have a container nearby to catch the used oil. As you can see, there is no liquid coming out after removing the 19mm bolt. I am not sure if this is good or bad. Comment below if you know why this just happened. So I can now insert the 5mm Allen key to remove the overflow so that the remaining fluid comes out. If you notice that it's hard to remove the overflow, mainly because you are in an awkward position and don't have a good leverage, you can use the adjustable wrench I talked about in the beginning of the video. This will give you a better leverage and makes it easier to remove the overflow. It's only after we remove the overflow that most of the fluid comes out. As you can see, I have in my hands the overflow, which is a hollow, not a solid piece of aluminum. In addition, we can also see that the fluid is coming out pitch black. I'm now lowering the car since it's not necessary to have the car in the air anymore. In fact, as I said earlier, you don't need to lift the car up since there's enough space to work underneath the car. These are the aluminum overflow, the 19mm bolt, and the washer that I will be discussing later in the video. Also, only a quart of fluid was drained from the CVT, which I think is very little fluid. I am now installing the overflow back in place after I drained the fluid. I would recommend not to over tighten this tube since you can strip its thread very easily. I installed the 19mm bolt back in place too. I am now ready to put in the fluid, the moment we have been waiting for. If you don't have a funnel that is long enough, you can use one funnel on top of another one. Nissan CVT fluid tends to have a bluish color to it when it's new. Here I am putting 4.5 quarts, which translates into 4.5 bottles. It takes 4.5 bottles to overfill the transmission to the point where the fluid is almost about to spill out of the tube. But after I drain the transmission for the second time, the fluid level will level out. Now it's the time to install the cap back in place. One of the final steps is to run the engine for another 20 minutes to allow the new fluid to warm up a bit. It's recommended to go through all the gears: park, reverse, neutral, drive, and low. You can take your time on each gear and repeat multiple times. Now comes the crucial part. Remove the 19mm bolt while the car is running and allow the fluid to drain completely. I should note that it takes some time for the fluid to drain this time. The fluid is coming out clearer this time around because we mixed 4.5 quarts with the old fluid that stayed inside the transmission. So basically, the fluid is not all new, but rather a mixture of new and used fluid. While you wait for the fluid to drain, you can use this time to replace the washer on the 19mm bolt. It's best to replace this washer with a new one every time you replace the fluid, since they are relatively cheap and you can buy them at the dealership. I don't want to sound like this video is being sponsored by Nissan, so you can also buy the fluid and the washer from online sellers, although I highly recommend that you buy the original Nissan CVT fluid. I just prefer to buy from the dealership. As the CVT is leveling out, I'll leave the steps once again on the screen. You can also fast forward the video. This is how they replace the transmission fluid at the dealership twice. And also they said that the filters do not have to be replaced unless you are rebuilding the transmission. Once the fluid has been drained, I will now install the 19mm bolt. I used a torque wrench with 25 pounds to install the bolt. So in total, 3.5 quarts came out of the car, including the first quart I initially drained, and this second time that the car was running. After I installed the coolant reservoir back in its place, I can now test drive the car to see how it drives. I'm going through all the gears and even using the overdrive. The car drives and shifts smoothly and no problems have showed up. This is the car's mileage at the time of doing this video, but currently the odometer is currently at 159,000 miles since it took me some time to edit and upload this video. Anyway, it's recommended to replace your CVT every 20,000 to 30,000 miles, especially in these Nissan CVT transmissions, for the longest transmission life. This procedure is how they did it at the Nissan dealership twice. They said that the filters don't have to be replaced unless you are rebuilding the transmission, but comment down below what you think. I hope you find this helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe.